Spam sam, naleli spam sam, stula ganjani. Spam sam, spam sam, yeah, sis with spam sam, ahus with spam sam, stula ganjani. Spam sam, ahus with spam sam, stula ganjani. It's utela mataukiang, aukiang. Utele ngata ukinang, kena kombre. Utele ngata ukinang, yeah. Utele ngata ukinang, kena kombre. Ay, utele ngata ukinang, ukinang. Utele ngata ukinang, kena kombre. Utele ngata ukinang, yeah. Utele ngata ukinang, kena kombre. Yeah, bamsam, bamsam, awusi bamsam.
Makabane niyamesabana, niyamesabana. Yuko wenza njani, wala wasikonde. Makabane niyaboyikana,
Uthele ngathi awuqinanga, awuqinanga. Uthele ngathi awuqinanga, qina khombe. Uthele ngathi awuqinanga, awuqinanga. Uthele ngathi awuqinanga, awuqinanga. Uthele ngathi awuqinanga, qina khombe. Uthele ngathi awuqinanga, awuqinanga. Yasizwe isibhamu sami, isibhamu sami. Laleli isibhamu sami, sidubula kanjani. Isibhamu sami, isibhamu sami. Isibhamu sami, yasizwe isibhamu sami, isibhamu sami. Awuzwe isibhamu sami, sidubula kanjani. Isibhamu sami, isibhamu sami. Awuzwe isibhamu sami, sidubula kanjani. Uthela ngathi awuqinanga, awuqinanga. Uthela ngathi awuqinanga, qina khombe. Uthela ngathi awuqinanga, uthela ngathi awuqinanga, qina khombe. Uthela ngathi awuqinanga, awuqinanga. Uthela ngathi awuqinanga, qina khombe. Uthela ngathi awuqinanga, uthela ngathi awuqinanga, qina
Lishonile malangeni. Lishonile Maswati. I'm sorry to say malangeni. Lo nibingelela ko ke namuhla ngumzwandile Shongwe. Ngiyacabanga ukuthi labanye benu sebake bangibona la kulesinye isifundo sethu. Ngiwasemoneni ngokuchamuka kahle kahle. Kepha ke ngokuhlala ngasingahlala ngalapha eSouth Africa. Emaswati ke atawati ke namuhla ukuthi sitofunza futhi njengoba nje sihlale sifunza silicembu lephudem Kepha-ke singafundisi onke emalungu ephutemo kuphela, kepha sifundisa futhi onke emaswati ngani ngemibandzela nemigomo yephutemo nangama-topics nje okungawuthi ngalokhu kufanele ukuthi sikwadi epolitikini singemaswati. Ndawukhumbula-ke emaswati ukuthi sifundvo sethu sesithathu lesi kucalile lo mnyaka, kepha nje sifundvo sethu sesine solokhu saqala lo mkhankaso wokufundisa emaswati ngepolitiki. Sihloko sethu-ke namhla amaswati ngiyacabanga ukuthi nibonile ukuthi sithi the politics of democratic transition. Siyitabe sikhuluma ngani-ke namhla amaswati? Siyitabe sikhuluma ngokuthi kwente kanjani ngesikhathi phela amasho ukuthi kuba nelushintsho. Ngidawusho kanjalo ngesiswati transition kusima kusho ukuthi kutaba nelushintsho. Bekuphethe lo hulumende lo, kepha-ke nyalo sitawuphasa lomunye. Lelu shintsho-ke kusilente kanjani? Sitabe sikhuluma-ke ngaloko-ke namuhla ukuthi kuhamba kanjani, yini imigomo lebakhona. Bese kuthi-ke sitawukhuluma-ke ukuthi iphutemo yona njengoba nje sihlanganiswe ngiyo la, ithi yona kuleyo transition or kulelo lushintsho ifise ukuthi kwendeke kanjani. Lo bese sitakukhuluma-ke namuhla-ke sitawukhuluma-ke nginetinkhulumo tethu letimbili. Ubekutaba Professor Hamilton Semelane, ngiyacabanga ukuthi labanye benu bayamati. Bese-ke phindze futhi namuhla sitaba na Dr. Reynold Racine. Nguye-ke lo taba khona namuhla sitawucela ukuxolisa emaswatini ukuthi Professor Semelane ngetizathu letingetulu kwemandla akakakhona ukufinyelela namuhla. Kepha-ke sicabanga ukuthi asichubeke nohlelo lethu, sitawuchubeka naye comrade Reynold Racine. Lo kutaba nguyena-ke litasitfulela-ke namuhla ukuthi isifundo sethu sima kanjani. Ngidawucela-ke kumethula-ke senior comrade Ray Racine kini maswati nakini ma-comrades. Ngidawumfundzela nje kancane ukuthi ungubani uchamuka kuphi. So ngoma senivile-ke maswati lamahle ukuthi ngu-Reynold Racine, igama lakhe-ke lelinye lelatiwa kuligama lakhe limzabalazo kuthiwa ngu-comrade Jabavu. Nguye-ke comrade Racine lo nguye lo one of the founding members of iphutemo. Ndasi njengesiswati ngibona abacala labasungula licembu lephutemo le ngeminyaka ngabo-1980s. Comrade Jabavu uchamukapi, watalelwa kaManzini. Udala ngubani? Udala ngubaba wakhe lobekachamuka eSouth Africa nama kwakhe bekaLiswati. Ndakhumbula ukuthi ngaleso sikhathi namanye ama-South Africans or labadzabwa khona nesikhwahlande bebasukile ngale makhaya kubo bato ukhosela even nakangwane ngalokuthi kwakunembi eSouth Africa. Ndawuthi-ke kwakunemzabalazo nokulwa nembathwa yemabhunu. Utalwa kanjalo-ke comrade Ray Racine kaManzini. Lokuthi-ke atalelwe eSouth Africa nokutalelwa nokuthi abe netimphansi eSouth Africa nakangwana kwamenda kokuthi adlale inzima lenkulu ekukhululeni-ke lona live lase-South Africa, nokuthi-ke adlale lichaza kakhulu kule politiki ngesikhathi akhona eSwatini. Comrade Jabavu wase timbandzakanye nelicembu le-ANC. Ngidawuthi-ke kujoyina licembu le-ANC nga-1981. Wase-ke soyahamba-ke sokujoyina-ke labo-ke betembi te-ANC umkhonto wesizwe. Umjoyina nini-ke umkhonto wesizwe? Umjoyina nga-1983. So lapho-ke wasebenta-ke under special operations, command yakhe kwakungu-Ubhani Mlokwane. So beka ingcenye-ke wasidlala lichaza lelikhulu-ke comrade Racine laba wakhumbula kahle ekuhlaseleni kweSasol. So la kuthiwa iSasol 2 le bese i-refinery yaseSekunda. Namuhla-ke wendani-ke comrade Jabavu ukhona la eSouth Africa, usolophindze futhi utimbandzakanye nayo yona ipolitiki elicembini lephutemo, futhi-ke nala South Africa ungu-president welicembu lekuthiwa Shosholoza Progressive Movement. Comrade Jabavu, siyajabula ukuthi sibe nawe namuhla. Siyatichenya ukuthi sinawe as member yephutemo, one of the people labalwela inkululeko yase-South Africa lathine labanye lasihleli khona si-comfortable. Phindze futhi siyajabula ukuthi watimbandzakanya nekusunguleni ilicembu lephutemo insika yenkululeko yemaswati. Ndakucela ukukunika-ke comrade Jabavu namuhla ukuthi kube nguwe lesiholako kwesifundo sanamuhla. Isifundo sethu lesitawuthi lesengisishide emaswatini ukuthi the politics of democratic transition. Ndawuxolisa-ke futhi eMaswatini ukuthi futhi ngathi izathu etingetulu kwemandla comrade Ray Russell utawukhuluma ngesilumbi. Ngiyacabanga ukuthi eMaswati lamanye bekafuna ukuthi kumbe akhulume ngesiswati, kepha ngathi izathu ngiyacabanga ukuthi eMaswati latati understand utawukhuluma kakhulu ngesilumbi. Ndawucela ukuthi ama-comrades after this sikhona si-translate to Siswati so that nabogogo emakhaya beve ukuthi bekatheni comrade Jabavu. Comrade Jabavu, ngicela kunika wena usihlephulele ukuthi usipheseleni namuhla. Over to you, comrade.
Thank you, comrade. Siyabonga kakhulu, my comrades, and ngiyakwati ukukhuluma Swati, so I will try to mix Swati ne English. Ayikho a problem. Amandla, comrades, amandla. The subject esikhuluma ngayo namhlanje is a very important subject for lokwenzakalayo eSwatini namhlanje. Swaziland, let's call it Eswatini, is going through a process of transition. And it is important for us to draw from experiences of how transitions took place in similar situations in our neighboring states. I will draw on the experiences of Mozambique, Angola, Zimbabwe, and Namibia. But angeke nginikeza ama-details ukuthi kwenzakalani in a detailed manner. I will just give you some highlights so that you understand the potholes that you may face in the attempts to undertake the transition and manage the transition to ensure that you get the correct outcomes for democratization of Eswatini. Briefly, we need to understand the transition from a particular dispensation to a desired dispensation is riddled with problems because kunama antagonisms, let's say it that way, antagonisms between lava abaphethe umbuso and lava abafuna change. So that is a natural process. There will be conflict. And the question is, how do you manage that conflict? So whatever we do, we need to keep that in mind. The transition is a conflict-ridden process. And we need to arm ourselves with the correct ideas, tools, and methods to deal with conflict during transitions. The main factor that affects the transition is the involvement of various external factors to the problem. There are external interests that must also be managed who wish to see a certain type of outcome that is achieved by the negotiations process leading to the transition. The example of Mozambique is straightforward. It was a liberation war waged by Frelimo after its formation in 1962 in Tanzania, led by Eduardo Mondlane. And they then moved into Maputo and captured certain provinces from the north, heading down to Maputo. Mondlane was killed in 1969. Samora Machel took over, a seasoned soldier and leader. But during that time, kwaba ne coup a coup d'etat in Portugal, where the government in Portugal was removed. And this made it easier for Frelimo to then march into Maputo and take over Maputo with little resistance. There is very little to learn from that process because it was a military takeover. There was little negotiations. But the lesson we are learning from the Uguti, armed struggle can become part of the process of transition and has been a part of political transition in Africa during the anti-colonial struggles. But whether that is still relevant today, post-colonial, we are not sure. We will discuss that. Angola, what was different in Angola is that there were three main political contenders or political parties that were fighting the Portuguese regime in Angola. A similar instance, obviously, because they were under Portuguese rule, the coup in Portugal allowed the political parties to then converge and lead to the liberation of Angola. But there had to be some kind of negotiations between the three contending parties. There was the Movement for the Popular Liberation of Angola, the MPLA, led by Agostinho Neto, and the MPLA was supported by the Portuguese Communist Party, Cuba, and the then USSR, the Soviet Union. And then there was Finland, led by Holden Roberto. It was mainly based around the Congo region. So it was supported by Zaire, to some extent, I think France and England and South Africa. Then there was UNITA of Jonas Savimbi, which was mainly supported by South Africa and England. The strength of these three different parties were not the same. MPLA was the leading front, both militarily and in terms of supporting the ground. UNITA was the weakest militarily, but it had support in certain provinces on the ground, and that gave it the strength. The weakest in terms of popular support was Finland of Holden Roberto. So when they then converged and the collapse of the Portuguese regime led to the takeover of Luanda by these three groups under the leadership of the MPLA, there had to be negotiations, and an agreement was signed in Portugal between the three parties, leading to the establishment of the government in Luanda. But the tensions broke up and there was civil war. The MPLA was able to fight back and defeat the two parties and drove them out of Luanda. They tried to form their own little government in Huambo province. It didn't work. The Cubans came in, the Russians came in, support MPLA to stabilize. South Africa got involved in there with UNITA, and there were big casualties. And South Africa lost at the Battle of Cuarto Carnevale and the Cunene River. That is history. And that led to the independence of Angola. So the main thing again here is there was armed struggle. There was also mass support on the ground, the people supporting these organizations. And the lesson we're learning from this is that the three political parties needed to come together and negotiate and come to a settlement to resolve the problem, right? So it's a different scenario compared to what is happening in Eswatini today, because these were fights against colonial powers, and therefore the liberation armies were supported globally, and in particular by other African countries, because they were fighting for independence. Zimbabwe, almost similar situation. Unilateral declaration of independence by Ian Smith in 1965 removes Zimbabwe from Britain and unilaterally declares it's independent, but still under white minority rule. It's not recognized by anybody. The United Nations, they reject it, and there emerges the liberation movement under Joshua Nkomo, Robert Mugabe, Cannon Banan, and all those groups coming together to fight for. Because Zimbabwe is isolated, the sanctions are biting. The white minority regime decides in 1979, January, to have a referendum and to conduct an election. The two main parties, ZAPU under Joshua Nkomo and ZANU PF, reject that election, that referendum. But the referendum was a white-only referendum. Sorry for that. But the election that followed thereafter was an election that was rejected by these two main political parties. Cannon Banana and Reverend Muzorewa participate under the African National Council, UANC, and they win 51% of the vote, and they become the government of Zimbabwe. Cannon Banana becomes the president. Reverend Muzorewa becomes the prime minister. The government is rejected by the United Nations, is rejected by the liberation movements, the two main liberation forces. And there's a crisis in Zimbabwe. So the settlement is not holding. It is then after that decided Uguti, they must have a proper negotiated settlement. They converge at Lancaster House in the UK. Joshua Nkomo is invited, Robert Mugabe is invited, Reverend Muzorewa is also invited, representing what is now a government in Zimbabwe, which is not legitimate, it's not recognized. They get to Lancaster House, they chart out a program of action leading to a democratic election of 1980. You can see the time span is about a year, actually even less than a year, because the people of Zimbabwe are hungry for liberation. There is no waste of time. People want change immediately. So the Lancaster Agreement is then signed. It stipulates certain processes and steps. The one important highlight of that is that they had to recognize an authority in Zimbabwe that would continue to deliver services to the people through the transition. So they agreed that there would be a governor that would be in charge and would monitor and implement the changing process. There would be time frames. They also agreed on constitutional principles, fundamental constitutional principles, what they called the constitution outline, which was then used as a basis for the negotiations. Sorry, I'm not giving you much detail about this because I was only asked to prepare this part of my presentation today. So I'm just giving you snippets. So the lessons we're learning from there is that you need to have some kind of an authority. You need to have timelines or time frames. You also need to have basic principles that must be included in the constitution to be written. And then clearly spell out the processes and steps leading to an election. In Zimbabwe, they were talking about having a constituent assembly, and the constituent assembly will write the constitution. The constituent assembly may decide to be the parliament that legislates until the election process takes place. So all those are lessons that we can learn from Zimbabwe in managing the transition in Eswatini. South Africa and Namibia, very similar cases. The warring parties is the white minority apartheid regime that was governing both Namibia and South Africa. You will remember that Namibia, after the defeat of Germany in World War II, Namibia was given over to be administered by South Africa because South Africa was part of the war. So they needed to give South Africa the spoils of war, as they called it, because they shared the world in a way as a benefit of the outcome of World War II. So South Africa in 1956 was then given Namibia to manage, given by the League of Nations, which preceded the United Nations. So South Africa is in charge of Namibia. And the people of Namibia start agitating for their liberation, for their independence from South Africa. Namibia was a German colony. The administration of Namibia by South Africa was to last for 10 years, if I'm not mistaken, until 1966. In 1966, the United Nations then took over the administration of Namibia, technically or legally. But South Africa appointed the governor. South Africa was the default authority in Namibia during this time. So the war, the liberation struggle is then directed at the South African authority in Namibia, which is basically an apartheid regime that is in charge there. Then you have the Southwest African People's Organization, SWAPO, which is the main liberation movement aligned to the African National Congress. Is the main political contender until such time that the United Nations made a decision that Namibia must be granted independence. Then we know the factors leading to that. The defeat of SADF, the South African Defense Forces in Namibia at Kuatu Kadavile battle and Kunene River compromised the ability of South Africa to fight SWAPO and MPLA from that front. So South Africa is weakened. and the world realizes that the only solution is to grant independence to Namibia. And that is then negotiated. The United Nations sets up UNTAG, United Nations Transitional Authority Group, to manage the transition in Namibia. So the negotiations now in Namibia are supervised by the United Nations between the two warring factions, which is SWAPO and South Africa. A program of action is designed from 1978 until the final elections in 19. When did the elections take place in Namibia? 1990? Yes, 1990. So it's a 10-year process, basically. 1978, 1988. It's 10 years negotiating the independence of Namibia. So again, the lesson that we take from this is that it can be a protracted process. It can be a long process. But we understand why that was the case, because there were certain interests that were established there. They needed to move certain resources, certain equipment, certain evidence, and it took the 10-year period until the elections took place. But again, SWAPO is the leading liberation movement. Just at the dawn of election, South Africa steps in and assists the formation of something called the Democratic, let me just read this for you. It's called the DHA, Democratic, where is this? DTA, Democratic Ten-Hale Alliance. The DTA emerges now in Namibia as a contender and a contestant in the upcoming elections. And it's primarily representing white interests, but it's well-funded, and contests the elections against SWAPO. But unfortunately, it could not sway the voters in Namibia, and SWAPO won the election. And it's still the governing party in Namibia. So this is an important lesson that whenever there is a transition, there will be outside forces and outside interests that will come in and pump money to try and weaken the leading proponent for change, the leading liberation movement. The same happened in South Africa. A lot of people believe that the IFP was used to weaken the ANC. We remember the black-on-black violence. A lot of money was pumped into the IEC to destabilize the ANC and the black voters who were the majority constituency for the ANC before the elections took place. So you expect that to happen. So those are the experiences of transitions in Southern Africa. Now let's come and look at the case of Swaziland, which is slightly different because now you are contesting against a local authority in the sense of a national authority, not a colonial authority. Therefore, your approach to this whole problematic needs to be slightly different from what happened during the colonial struggles. Like I mentioned before, military action activity was accepted in the struggle against colonial domination. And the question is, would that still apply under conditions where it's an independent state and the liberation movement is trying to assert a new dispensation within a national order or national dispensation? It's a key question. Again, there will be international forces that you need to analyze carefully and find out what their interests are. I think South Africa is one interested party, possibly Mozambique, and the number of embassies that are active in Swaziland should give you an idea as to what interest they have in Swaziland. I know that there is the British embassy there, is a former colonial master. There is the American embassy there, the Taiwanese embassy. I think those would be the main actors. And I think we would be able to then do an analysis to say what would be their interests in Swaziland and what kind of a Swaziland are they likely to want to see. That analysis, I think, is a subject of debate that must be undertaken. And then decide how you interface with those outside forces, those international forces, and see how best you can not just understand their interests, engage with them to get some kind of solution to what it is that they're interested in. We know Taiwan, for example, its biggest interest is to remain independent from China. How do you engage with Taiwan? What kind of support would you want, if any, from Taiwan? The United States, we know that their biggest interest is to have a presence in Southern Africa. Prior to the independence of South Africa, they were worried about socialist Mozambique. And for them to be in Swaziland would have been strategic to look and watch over Mozambique. But I don't think that is still, it still subsists. Things have changed. Mozambique has changed. The world has changed. And then the British could possibly subscribe to a similar philosophy, to say they would like a Swaziland that is stable, a Swaziland that is either independent of Mozambique, of socialist influence, a Swaziland that they would be able to work with, either control or direct or whatever you want to look at. These are real questions that need to be addressed. And one needs to look at the balance of forces globally to be able to answer some of those questions. Because you make a mistake there, you are dead in the water. Already from my little experience, I know that Pudemo has been painted into a left-wing corner, and some of the states may say maybe Pudemo is left-wing, which I think is an incorrect interpretation. Pudemo is not a communist party. Pudemo is not left-wing. My understanding is that Pudemo is fighting for a democratic dispensation in Swaziland and is talking about freedom of choice, is talking about independence of the judiciary, is talking about the multi-party, which is basically an accepted democratic order worldwide. But that's a subject for another day. Now, looking at the path to a negotiated settlement, which is an instructed document by Pudemo, and in my view, it provides an adequate guideline as to the steps required to reach an agreement and a negotiated settlement. It is important that there should be preliminary work that is put in place where you say these are the requirements to create a level playing field for all players to participate. I think that's very important. How that is defined, I think it needs more flesh. The document as it stands now is a guideline, but I think we need to put more flesh into how do you prepare the preliminary phase. Do you prepare it in your corner office alone and everybody else does their own document? Or do you come together and talk about what are the preconditions required for the negotiation to take place? That is critical. In South Africa, we had what we called talks about talks, where the regime called the African National Congress into a meeting. I think it was the Grooteskeur minutes, because it was held in Grooteskeur in Cape Town. And they outlined the fundamentals, say, for the talks to take place, this is what is needed. These are the people that need to be talked to, in what format. So that, I think, is still a gray area that needs to be ironed out. And then the document talks about a negotiations forum, and it lists all entities, including the current government, traditional leaders, churches, organized labor, organized business. And I think the role of this body is to prepare the outlines and the fundamentals required in a constitution. And before you elect a constituent assembly that then writes a constitution. I think, again, at this level, we need to be very, very cautious in selecting people to attend a negotiations forum. It's important that people come there and are able to prove that they have a constituency, to prove that they have been democratically mandated to do what they are doing. I don't know if traditional authorities, your chiefs, Abo Chief, Abo Induna, have that mandate democratically given by their members to go and talk on their behalf. It's a question that needs to be looked at very carefully. I would envisage a situation whereby you want to be inclusive. You want to include as many stakeholders as possible. But then you must define their roles in this meeting. Are they going to be spectators? Are they going to be active participants? Are they going to vote on issues? What is the weight of their vote? And how are they represented? All those issues must be ironed out, because if it's free for all, it will dilute the negotiations process, and you will lose the end goal that you want to achieve. And that's the critical point of the negotiation. So that must be defined very carefully to say, you come here, you can come as an observer, or you can come to share ideas. Brainstorm, there's a brainstorming session. In Lancaster House, they had 47 plenary sessions through the negotiation. Some were brainstorming sessions. You brainstorm with everybody, you take notes. Then the delegates, properly elected delegates with voting rights, you have checked their credentials in terms of their representativity, in terms of their constituency in terms of their footprint. You then take them out, put them in a room, they vote on issues and come back to plenary to say these are the issues you debate. So we need to structure that negotiation forum in such a way that it works and it's not hijacked by the one-man band, the guy who forms the party yesterday, Umafiki Zolo, afike constituents, negotiating forum, and just spoil the party. You don't want that. Because these are the strategies that they use to disrupt and lengthen processes. So you need to be very careful about that. So the negotiating forum is got to have certain chambers. And we need to design a formula to say, as a voting delegate, this is what you need. These are the credentials that qualify you to vote. But in plenary, everybody can talk whatever they talk, hot air, it's okay. But when you go to the voting chamber, those are the delegates that have the voting mandate. As an example, you can say there should be a cut-off point. Say any political party or organization formed after 19, let's say 20, you need to find a reason to say maybe when the mass action started leading to the break into the negotiations mode. You can say 2018, 2020. Any political party formed after 2020 will be excluded. It's an example. I'm not saying it should be. You have a cut-off date because you don't want parties that are formed yesterday to come here. If you want, you can say January 2022, it's up to you, but you need to have a cut-off date. And you say any party that comes to this forum must have so many members registered under it that can be proven as members of those. Any party should have this kind of footprint in order to negotiate. And this is politics. The negotiations is political parties. You can include maybe labor, you can include civil society organs, but we need to understand the modalities of this negotiation process and define it carefully. I think at the moment, what I've seen, the documents I've looked at, there is a casual approach to this. This is not a joke. You're going to win this thing now at planning, preparatory stage, or lose it now. So if you do not do your homework now, you're going to lose this process. Got to be clear. The formulas must be prepared and agreed upon. And then you can move. And then you decide, do you have a constituent assembly? Who is going to be the authority in charge during this whole negotiation process? How long is it going to take? Do you want a constituent assembly or you just want an election? An election using either the current instrument or you're going to design an electoral code specific to the transition elections, and then the elected group becomes the government for the next 5 years. Drafts the constitution with a clear mandate, review the constitution, redraw the constitution, restructure the form of government, etc. That decision must be taken, whether it's a constituent assembly or you actually electing a government. There have been talks about a government of national unity. Again, if you want to go the GNU route, you would then have to say, like what happened in other countries. I think in Zimbabwe, Lancaster House, they said they're reserving 20 seats in the parliament for the white minority for a period of maybe 5 years. Is that how you're going to structure the GNU and say, out of the 55 seats, you're going to reserve 10 seats in parliament, which is a negotiated sunset clause, which says every political party of maybe the 6 political parties that exist will have automatically a member reserve, a seat reserved for that political party in the parliament, but that should not by any means constitute a majority of the National Assembly. That would be an element of a GN. But we're talking democracy here. It's got to be an elective process. It's got to be the wish of the majority. They must elect representatives to structure decision. Right. I will stop there, comrades. I know I haven't covered all the issues, but want to raise any questions, please feel free. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rasin, for your lecture. Kubuta ke la kepha ke ngidawuphinza futhi ngicela ukuthi umasho ukuthi emaswati anemibuto ngicela awafake le mibuto kulapho khona ama platforms lesengicela sikhona Swaziland News ku demo page na ku SUDF lapho khona ema questions bangawafaka khona. Ngicela ke kubuyele emuva ke kancane mina ku summarize nje kancane lokuthi kahle kahle or ngidawukhuluma ngesiswati so that lo sekhaya evele ukuthi bokhuluma ngani. Uqaleke ngokusilandzisa kancane ukuthi kwendakalana eAfrika ngoba plus lokho sethu namhla besikhuluma ngaso besithi the politics of democratic transition. So sikhuluma ngani ke la besikhuluma ngokuthi kwendakalana emuva ubeke tibonelo ukuthi emuva eMozambique, eNamibia, eZimbabwe i-transition yakhona yaba kanjani. So wabeka kusikhona kahle kahle uhlukile kancane kunala kangwane eSwaziland. Why? Ngalokuthi khona kwakuliwa kwaba ne-armed struggle. After that ke kwase sokudingakala ukuthi sale sibuya phansi, babuya phansi, bahlala phansi, baxoxisana ukuthi okay nyalo ke sesehlulene ngetikali ascendeni A, B, C and D. Ngileyo ke transition lokhulume ngayo ukuthi kulamanye amave yendeka. Wabeka ke futhi nase South Africa nokusona khona kwende kanjani. Ngicabanga ukuthi usibekeleke kuloko ke ngesikhathi wendlalela ke wendlalela ini ke le lesson yakho. Wase siyabuya ke manje sokukhuluma ngendaba yokuthi ekhaya ke eSwaziland khona yini info lengendeka. So ubekile ke i-document le yephudemo sithi ecaphu nje kancane kuyo ukuthi iphudemo kahle kahle nayithi kutawuba ne-negotiated settlement. So ikhona ke le document loyikhothile. Why? Because ubonakala emuva kusingathi sivele at the end of the day ugcina kuhlalisene phansi kuxoxiswana kuthiwe this is what we are going to do. Nabo lesitawuvumelana ngako ukuthi sale siphatha ke manje ini leave. So ke then wasiyachubeka ke siyasitshela ukuthi ngokubona kwakho ufuna ukuthi le timpo leti tihambe kanjani. Uyasho ukuthi kulawo ma negotiations la ufanele ukuthi umuntu lotakhona kulawo ma negotiations kube ngumuntu losuka athunywe ngilabanye. Ngidawusike umuntu lena constituency angisho kanjalo. It's either it's a political party ngoma is civic organization but una constituency. Hayi nje ukuthi utela wedwa ukuthi utawena uwedwa jwi awakamelele umuntu. So uyayichaza kule ndzaba lokho ukuthi uye kuhambe kanjani kuleto tingxoxo. So kungendeka ukuthi sifuna ini, sifuna ukuthi sibe some kind of a constitutional assembly lapho khona sitawuhlala khona sonke sikhulumisane ke lokho ukuthi cha sitawuhamba kanje. Wasuyabeka ukuthi futhi kungendeka futhi ukuthi sithathe indlela ezihlukene. Okay, singendeka kube silabanye sicabanga ukuthi kumbe sithathe indzaba le yokuthi sibambisane uhulumende ukubambisana or sichinje constitution or kube yini sihambe siyokhetha vele ukuthi sesikhetha uhulumende. So ukuthi ke ngiyo kwetindlela leto leti ngaba khona letivumelekile ngidawuthi letivulelekile ukuthi singatisebenzisa kuyini kule transition lekhona. Lokunye lokubekile ukuthi as much as sifuna inkululeko kutaba ne transition kutaba khona abantu labasibukelela ngephandle ubekisile nje ukuthi kunama international interests yasibukile bantu labafuna kwati ukuthi kahle kahle utawuhamba kuhambe kufike. Ngidakugudluta kuloko ngoma kuyevakala ukuthi nalo umyambasada wabuta ukuthi nifuna leli venje ndaliphasa kanjani ngilawo ma interest lokukhuluma ngawo lawo ukuthi kutaba khona abantu vele labatawufuna kwathi lokuthi nini at the end of the day ndaliphasa kanjani lelive. Wabalileke la khona ekhaya eSwaziland ukuthi kunabo bani wathi ke phinda futhi sibokucaphela naloko sibuke lokuthi kuhamba kanjani. Ngani ngoba utawuthola ukuthi at the end of the day kunama interest lokho kungaphinda futhi kunenjani kudelelo mzabalazo wethu ngalokuthi kunalawo ma interest la khona. Wase siyabhekisa ke futhi ukuthi kungendeka futhi ukuthi mase sivumelene ukuthi siyokhulumisana sicale phansi sicale ngama talks about talks ngokuthi sesiyakhuluma ke manje siyavumelana usayicha sesiyahamba ke manje setafuleni but before setafuleni asende A B C and D kunkhani ke siya kuphi kunkhani siya etafuleni. Ngicabanga ukuthi ngiloko senior leader lokukhulume ngako sengikuthi nje sengikushwambakanya ngisho njalo ngasiswati makusho ukuthi uyavumelana nami ke leader sengidacela ukubuda ke manje ngibe ngisamelela amanye leminye imibuto emaswatini. So kulo umbuto wami ke wokucala ukuthi kule simo lesikhona ekhaya manje eSwaziland ucabanga ukuthi wena kupossible yini ucabanga ukuthi kungenteka yini vele ukuthi ekugcineni sigcina sifike kule political transition lapho khona sitawukhulumisana khona i-negotiated settlement njengoba iphute mobe ishilo ukuthi ifuna i-negotiated settlement kule simo lesikhona manje after everything that has happened in the past year or so ucabanga ukuthi lokho kupossible yini and ungayicushisa uthini as iphute ukuthi ikuthathe kanjani lokho makusho ukuthi tawugcina kwendekile. So nje umbuto nje ngidawuthi ukabili kahle kahle ukucala ukhona ucabanga ukuthi tawendeka yini uma kusho ukuthi tawendeka siphute mase kuthathe kanjani ngaphandle kwalokho ukusichazele kona in general. Ngiyacabanga ukuthi kuyacaca Comrade Jabavu ngicela kunika wena.
Thank you, comrade. No, it's true. We would see there is no other way. Negotiations are the accepted route for political transition globally. And in the case of Eswatini, already there are signs we would see even the powers that be are realizing that talks are the solution going forward. But for this to succeed, it's a fact that whatever you don't win in the streets, you will not win on the table. So, it's like in boxing. In boxing, I've never done boxing, but I've watched it a lot. When you see that your enemy is starting to wobble, that's when you attack like a wounded tiger. You don't step back. So for this momentum to succeed, it requires more activity on the ground. Because we've seen similar instances where you put your foot on the accelerator and you surge forward, and then you take your foot off the accelerator and the process is lost. So I think this is the time when you keep that foot on the accelerator and you mobilize the people. You tell them, Uguti, there is a light at the end of the tunnel and we need to get there. So mass action has to be escalated to push the regime to the table. And every avenue, every area, every platform is an avenue for struggle. This is my opinion. Bafuna ukunibita esibayeni manje to neutralize the process. Do you go there or do you not go there? If you don't go there, you're making a very clear point that you do not approve of this. And without the political parties in that crawl, there is no negotiation. Nobody will accept whatever happens. That is the outcome of boycotting that. We saw what happened in Zimbabwe when Reverend Banana and his party contested elections. Nobody, they were in power for a year and nobody recognized that government. So Pudemo is the leader of society. There is no dispute about that. I'm not saying because I've been part of Pudemo at its own formation. Pudemo is the leader of society. And Pudemo must retain that leadership of society. It must give directions as to where the struggle is going. If you decide to go to Esbayeni, you go there to disrupt the process. It must not succeed. That's my view. If you decide to go there, go in numbers. Fill up that crawl with 100,000 people. And boo anybody who's talking there. So both ways, you can achieve the same objective. But you decide which one is going to be more impactful. It's your decision. So what I'm saying is a negotiated settlement. I'm advising Pudemo that is the way forward. I'm advising Mswati and his government that is the only way forward. It's negotiations. And it's a building block. I know some people think a mass uprising will overthrow the whole thing. The SADC protocols. Not that it wouldn't work, but the SADC protocols. And we must understand there's Mozambique, there's South Africa, they can send in their forces to maintain order, and their definition of order may not be what you have in mind. Their definition of maintaining order would be to reinstate the government and place order in that country. So all those things need to be understood and interpreted correctly. But for me, I think I'm a strong advocate of a negotiated settlement. But whichever party plays its role carefully and adequately, that party will win at the table. But I like what I'm seeing, political parties coming together, civil society coming together with one voice, and that determination, that energy, but you need the people, the masses on the ground, push this process. It seems to be slowing down now, and it needs to accelerate. That's what I want to say.
Ngiyabonga Comrade Java for leyo mpendulo leyo. Lenguvilisisile kahle ukuthi i-mass action ifuna ukuthi ichubeke, because without leyo mass action uhulumende utabe usungena ngemali emadvolweni bese soyathula nje singasachubekile lama negotiations. Ngaphike futhi ngibuye ke Comrade Jabava ukuthi eMaswati uyakhumbula ukuthi kube nenkinga yokuthi adutshulwa abulawa, lamanye namuhla sikhuluma ngokuthi achwalile. And there was this anger. You know what? If we can get some few guns here and there, then we can be able to liberate ourselves. You talked a little bit about armed struggle, and then you ask the question, is it still relevant? So, umbuto wami manje utawuphosa lapho kuwe ukuthi kuke kwaba naloko wena as Comrade Ray Ryerson ubona ukuthi is that relevant yini namuhla? If most akukho relevant, usho ukuthi the only thing maybe lengasenda ukuthi sifake ipressure kuhulumende ukuthi sibuyele futhi singene esitaladini of it some of amaswati bekakhala ngokuthi bayasidubula. So ngicela kuva ukuthi is this still relevant in as part of kupusha uhulumende to the negotiated settlement or something that has lost value in this present day? Ngicela ukubuta lokho then bese singabuka la kusikhona yini lo buta.
Kawe, comrade, I've been in the trenches. I've slept in the bushes, in no man's land. I've operated equipment. It's not an easy choice to be a soldier in the liberation struggle. It takes a lot of courage and a lot of effort. It's the last resort of an oppressed people anywhere in the world, where if a regime refuses to talk, a regime refuses to negotiate, a regime resorts to violence against its own people, people naturally respond in a violent way. But my position on the Eswatini, I like Eswatini, not Swaziland, it's a colonial name. Must change it to Eswatini. Eswatini was a word initiated by Pudemo in 1990. Must remember that. It's not a Mswati creation, it's a Pudemo name, Eswatini. Eswatini, I think, is not ready for action. And I wouldn't advocate anything close to an armed struggle in Swaziland. I think mass action, coordinated, organized mass action is enough to change Swaziland and change it very radically in whatever way you want. So stay away from the guns. They are dangerous. We are all calling for silencing the guns in Africa. As political leaders, we are saying, silence the guns. We've had enough guns. We've had enough killings. Enough blood has been spilled. We don't want to see that anymore. You must talk to the police. You must talk to the soldiers. Because invariably, the end is near. And it's not avoided. You cannot avoid it. It's there. And we will have a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. But we've learned from our TRC in South Africa that our TRC had no teeth. If there is another TRC to happen in Swaziland, it must have a sting in the tail. And whoever has violated the rights of people, given instructions for people to kill citizens, that person must pay the price. And the end is near. The end is near. I can tell you now that right always triumphs over wrong. It's a natural phenomenon. If you do wrong, you are going to pay. So they must know that these police officers, these military army guys, we are going to take them to order. They will account and they shall pay. It must be very clear. Talk to them now, conscientize them, mobilize them. They must put those guns down. They must put those guns down and say, we're not killing our people. Our people want a simple thing, A simple thing.
Comrade Ray ngathi losilahlekela kancane. Ngicabanga usikhombe singamnika sikhashanyana kancane nje bese soyabuya. Ngicabanga usilahlekelwe i-network ngalapho angakhona ngakhona. Sisamele nje Comrade Ray Rasen ukuthi abuye emoyeni ngiyacabanga ukuthi mina ngikhona angakalahleki. Makusho ukuthi ukhona amaswati nani ma-comrades lokukhona laphinze futhi lenifuna kumbuta kona Comrade Jabavo. Ngicela nisithumelele lemibuto. Ngicabanga ukuthi kulahleka ke manje angisamboni nokumbona ngala. Kepha ke lo munye umbuto bengitambuta wona Comrade ngicabanga ukuthi utawuphinza abuye ngoma sikhathi ngicabanga ukuthi sisesenaso. Ngifuna kumbuta nje imibuto lemibili. Wokuqala bengifuna kumbuta ukuthi asichazele ngokuthi masho ukuthi sisike part of the negotiated settlement kuformisha maybe uhulumende ngidawuthi pheceleti i-GNU. Bengifuna kuvela ukuthi iformishwa ngubani kahle uyiformisha kanjani and i-comprise abobani. Comprise in everybody lokhona even for example le Constitutional Assembly lebeka khulumana ngayo itabafaka laba sembusweni futhi namuhla, and who's going to have that particular mandate ukuthi ayiformishe leyo GNU. Is it going to be Pudemo? It's funele in mandate yayo ukuthi ayiformisha or kube ngilomnye umuntu. Kodwa ucela ukuthi asichazele lapho. Ngihlahla lembi ke phinze useselahlekile. Umbuto wami ke wesibili yabe ngifuna kumbuta wona ukuthi uchaze ngokuthi we should not include everybody, especially usebenzisela igama lokuthi singasebenzisi labasha. So my question to that one was ukuthi masho sisho kanjalo, are we not excluding labanye ukuthi sibashiyela ngaphandle kanti phela sifuna ukuthi silese everybody ukuthi sihlangane in that particular Constitutional Assembly. So bengifuna usachaze lokho nje ukuthi i-meaning yakhona beyithini. Kepha ke ngiyabona lokho ukuthi ngazi ukuthi sowuthatha isikhashanyana angekho. Ngicabanga ukuthi nje ngidawumela nje 60 seconds ngisabuka ukuthi kukhona yini labakhona laba yabo lesimibuto. Uma sho ukuthi akabuyi ngihlahla lembu ngidawudzangakala ukuthi sivala with those two questions. Kepha ke ngidawufuna ukuthi ngidamcela Comrade Jabavo ukuthi asiphendulele lawo ma questions lawo, and then sesitawaphendula sesiwaphendula kumbe social media page yethu yePhudemo so that people can get clarity, because ngiyacabanga ukuthi bekungimbona yakhe le, so besifuna ukuthi asichazele kuyo ukuthi kuhamba kanjani. Ngitawucela ukuthi ke mina ngingumzwandile ngicela ukuthi ngivale ngoma angimati Comrade ukuthi utawukhona yini kubuya. Cha basuyabuya Maswati, basuyabuya. Ngicela ukuthi nje simele kancane saba ngikhulumile indlebe ukuthi cha is coming back. So leba ngicabanga nje ukuthi sikucabanga singaMaswati la kushito lenzaba yokuthi as much as basibulala, as much as basidubula, for now Swaziland ukuthi ngakala ukuthi siphinde futhi sibele emuva sibambane sibele emvestaladini. At the end of the day vele tinkundla ngeke tisiphathe forever. Funa siforce ukuthi sigcine tisikhulumisile. Diyathanza dithanzi. Masho ukuthi kade funeka ukusikhulumisa. Ngiyacabanga ukuthi futhi Comrade Jabavo ushilo ukuthi the last resort ukuthi kutawuba yini. Ngiyacabanga ukuthi nalabo bona laba siphethele live, they don't want to have a situation enjalo ukuthi live ligcine ligobhoda ingadi likubhodisa ukuthi abafuna ukukhuluma nathi. Sithembe nje ukuthi lokho utawugcina kwendekile. Sikhulumisane and live singaMaswati in peace njengoba bese ihlala in peace. Sengiphethe ke futhi ngimele okay nangu Comrade Jabavo soyangena. Lebe ngisiphindze futhi ngidawugcizelela. Ngicabanga ukuthi onke eMaswati ngiyacabanga ukuthi ayakugcizelela ngilenzaba yokuthi esibayeni. I'm not going to talk about this ukuthi kuchamuka directly from my organization, but ukhuluma kuchama from comrade Jabavu ukuthi indzaba isibaya sathi kahle ukuthi uthi ngokwembono wakhe we should not go there. Uma siya lapha siya nje ukuthi siyo disruptor. Why? Because sibaya ngeke kube yindlu letasisita. Ngicela phinde futhi ngikugcizelele lokho. Angisho ukuthi ngikhulumela organization, ngikhuluma lokhu suggest ngubani ucomrade Jabavu. Cabanga useze an organization sitansi sesithethwe i-organization seyivele seyis-communicating. Uyangena ke manje comrade Jabavu, ngidamela nje kancane ngiyambona soluyalotita la. Emaswati ke ngicela ukufunza la some of le mibuto lanayo. Ngiyacabanga lokho ukuthi lamanye utawukhona kuyiphendula but leminye angeke akhona. Wakhe umbukeli lapho uyabuta lokho ukuthi as much as maybe sitawukhona lokuya sitawufuna kuya esibayeni, what if ekugcineni sitawugcina singakakhoni kufinyelela khona. Yeah, lomunye angicabanga ukuthi umbuto the very same question then ubutile. I want to get the clarity concerning the issue of not involving new parties, etc. etc. Okay, comrade Jabavu sobuyile. Comrade Ray ngiyakubona but ke angiboni anguva ukhuluma. Usazama usahlanganisa tinsambo takhe. Okay, ngidawufunza nje la ema comments ebantu wasingisamele comrade Jabavu kusabuye. Lo munye ke uyamgceka la uthi cha comrade Jabavu uyahloniphisa kahle kahle lokuthi disesengakafunakala etikhali. Kulokuthi nje iplatform angeke zivume lapha kulokusho lekusho ukuthi in the public high ukuthi sekufuneka dona. Lo munye uthi wonke ungiyo ngiyacabanga ukuthi kusho ukuthi wonke umuntu uyayifuna inkululeko. Ngicela ukuchinja ke la ngiye kulenye iplatform whilst I'm waiting for comrade Rasen ukuthi abuye. Comrade Ray, I can see you but angiboni anguva ukhuluma. Okay, now lomunye uyamgceka comrade Jabavu la uthi cha comrade angeke kusho ukuthi let us stay away from guns. Okay, ngicabanga ukuthi comrade unenkinga kuze babukele ekhaya bangabukele mina kuphela la. Ngicela kusala ngimnika only about 60 seconds. Masho ukuthi akabuyi then sesitawuvala. Kusho ukuthi i-technology isalile nelilanga lanamuhla kusho ukuthi liyasala ngoma bekufanele ukuthi sibe na Professor Simelane kepha lesizathu ezingatulu kwamandla wagcina angakaphumeleli. Comrade Rasen, comrade Jabavu. Ngicabanga ukuthi ngazi ukuthi solo akatfolakali. Ngicabanga ukuthi Maswati ngicabanga ukuthi asivale. Ngicela kuva kulaba ngiphethe ngale ukuthi basisende kanjani. Ningaze nibuke mina kuphela nganze mina ngimoderator. Lo muntu lo ngiyena sithulela isikolo angekho. Kepha ke makusho ukuthi khona imibuto lekhona futhi sawucela ke Maswati ukuthi nisithumelele yona leyo mibuto ku Facebook page yethu yePhudema. Sitawuphinde futhi siyiphendvule khona lapho uma kuyabonakala ukuthi ngazi ukuthi kunenkinga. Okay, simzame ukugcina comrade Rasen. Uyangiva ngala?
Comrade,
Oh, you're
I'm
back.
back. Yes, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Kusubuyile. Cela ningahambi ke Maswati, sowubuyile ke sowubuyile Dr. Rasinle. Okay, my leader, kunembuto lapha le khona lebe ngisacela ukuthi ngikubute yona. Ngakathi uma so right ukuthi ngaphendula.
Yes, comrade, we can talk. I'm ready.
Okay, chief. Kuna statement lapha lo wise usasifundisa ukuthi kufuna ukuthi sibuke lokho ukuthi who is going to be part of the Constitutional Assembly or whatsoever we call it, or is going to be part of the talks kanjalo when it comes lokho ukuthi sifaka bobani. And then your statement kwakuthi sibokubheka lokho ukuthi singafaki abantu labasha. Okay, ubekisa ukuthi singafaki political parties lamasha. So umbuto wami ukuthi as much as maybe opinion yakho leyo ukuthi singabafaki labasha kumbe chazela yini balaleli ekhaya ukuthi ukusho ngaliphi lokho angeke yini ukuthi sebebasistabata uthi no usho kuthini ukuthi singafaki labasha because sesiyaba exclude lalabanye. Maybe you've got some reasons, some personal reasons lo raise lapho ukuthi why are you saying that, because labanye sebata sibuka ngathi sisa exclude sisangene laba angangeni laba kanti phela sifuna ukuthi sibe ndzawonye. Ngicela uphendule lapho my leader.
Thank you, leadership. Let me start by apologizing. My power went off, and we're back on now. There is a problem of electricity in Johannesburg these days, so sorry, my apologies for that. When I said I'm talking about it's a tendency which is very common everywhere in a transition. We would see the ruling elite, if for Mishama party, the night before our negotiations, Abo Mangololo, they've come from nowhere, you know, and that's why a cutoff point is then required. I know it's going to be highly contested, but we just need to look out for that. We would see what is the cutoff point. Should we say, for instance, it's last week? That's what the point I was making. We would see Agupe in a cutoff point. Because when they realize, we would see you formed a formula which says X, Y, and Z, then they form a group overnight. 10 guys come in and say we're a political party, and that disrupted the whole process. And it will neutralize the nature of the democratic dispensation you are trying to create. You don't want to exclude. You can get everybody to participate, go open forum discussion. But when it comes to the voting processes, go forum, your constitutional forum, the negotiations forum, maybe that's where you can then draw a line. This is where it stops. This is the cutoff point. But don't exclude people who have visible constituencies. Abane support, but just a risk. It's a risk management factor. You would see you do not want chance takers to come in here and disrupt the process, because they do it deliberately. History is very rich with those experiences. So I wasn't being cynical about it. I was just being cautious. We would say you are going to find those opportunists, you know, who see now here's an opportunity and let me step in and do something just to be part of a process. That is common. That is common. Thank you, Comrade.
Thank you so much, Comrade. Kuyavakala ngicabanga ukuthi kuyacaca kusi kahle bowubhekise ukuthi uthi i-question yami yokugcina ke my comrade ukuthi uke wakhuluma kancane ngolokuthi le singayihambisa kanjani le process, and then wathatha kancane kunzaba yokuthi sometimes kungenteka ukuthola ukuthi vele sisi decide ukuthi kuba nabo kuba ne GNU. So my question to you, Kemholi, would say, who is going to form that particular GNU? Is it going to be, I'm just making an example, is it one political party who can have the power to do that? Or is it just a few people who can have the power to do that? Or is it the whole Constitutional Assembly that can be able to determine, we are going to form this particular structure? And that particular structure, most of the time, according to your own knowledge, what does it really, sifaka bobani, sitamfaka yini uhulumende lokhona manje, sitawafaka yini amaphathi, sitayifaka yini civil society, sifaka bani bamasho ukuthi sesidecide ngokuthi kube kanjalo. So ngicela ungiphendulele loyo mbuto. Ngiyakhumbula eZimbabwe i-Government of National Unity yakhona yayifaka i-MDC, yayifaka nezanu PF. After sebakhulumisana ukuthi kube netinkinga lapha nalapha, bavumelana ukuthi cha, let us share power. In the case of Swaziland manje, I know ukuthi amthanzi Swaziland, uthanda iSwatini, but kunaleyo debate again ukuthi why are we insisting on Swaziland? So kulenkinga eSwaziland ke manje, if we go that route, who's got the responsibility of doing that? Ngicela ukuphosa kuwe lokho, then kuyoba umbuto wami wokugcina loyo Comrade Jabavu, and then ngicabanga ukuthi makude lemile khona ngalapha sitawana sesihlabe sesiyavala.
Yeah, comrade, the question Loibutayo is a very, very important question. GNU is a very nice concept, but does it work? Excuse me. That's why I said, Minuguti, if this is my personal opinion, that instead of a constituent assembly, elect a government. But the government must be such that in the legislature, you have seats that are reserved for the GNU. If I remember correctly, the legislature as Eswatini has got 55 seats. Whether the structure you agree with it or not, about Senate and National Assembly, I don't know whether that will be. But you can say, as a transitional measure for the first maybe 5 years, you are going to reserve maybe 10 seats, which will then be the GNU idea. You have those seats, even if Imangololo gets 10 votes, but you reserve a seat for them in that parliament. Yeah, one. That's a formula for a GNU that would work. And then once the parliament is now fully constituted, which is inclusive of all the political parties, one party each, but the majority party, as mandated by the majority of voters, because that's democracy. You cannot run away from that. The majority must speak. The majority must govern. So you cannot run away from that and share political power as political leaders. You can't do that. People must speak through their vote. So if we say 10 seats for GNU representatives, 45 seats elected representatives, that's the majority party. And then you form a government. And then you can decide, the leading party can then decide, when I form the cabinet, I can pick from the GNU members in the parliament to come to cabinet. But it should be at the discretion of the winning party to say, okay, we've won the election. We want to create the spirit of unity. I will take Swalimo as my deputy president, or whatever, if it's a presidential state. Or I will take these political parties and put them in the cabinet, retain the spirit. It can actually be even in the agreement, the MOU. When you form the government, in the cabinet, you should have at least at least maybe 5 members from the GNU component. You understand? So it forces the ruling party to select members from the GNU to put them into the cabinet. That's how it should work. So it still resonates with the democratic principle of a rule of the majority. That's my view. That's how it should be. Eswatini. The Eswatini is a nice name, guys, comrades. Botswana land changed to Botswana. Basotho land changed to Lesotho. Swaziland stayed with the colonial legacy and the colonial name. We must begin to decolonize our politics. Get rid of this name, Swaziland. It's a rubbish name. Eswatini, or get something better. That's my opinion again, comrades. Thank you.
Ngiyabonga comrade Jabavu ngaloko, but yeah, ngicabanga ukuthi we still have to debate a little bit ngaloko ukuthi leli gama kahle kahle sisebenzise liphi. Kepha ke la ukusesta ukuxoxa ngalinye ilanga emakhaya ngingumzwandile ngwakasho ngesibongo. Siyabonga kakhulu ukuthi nisibeketelele kwaze kwafika la. Sicela kamasho ukuthi ninayo imibuto lekhona futhi lengakachazeleki la, ngoba bengibase ngiyabuka ngala kudele ngiyibonako. Sitawucela ukuthi nisiphosele yona, sitawuphinda futhi sichubeke siyiphendule, sitayifaka ku Facebook page yethu, sichubeke kanjalo. Sengidawucela ukuthi manje sikhulumi sethu Dr. Ray Rasin azivalelisele kubo babokele emakhaya, then bese sesiyavala. Sibonga kakhulu nakubo bonke labathitha kusasa leli thuba namuhla basilalela, basinika futhi ne platform yabo ukuthi singakhuluma ngalesihloko besikhuluma ngaso namuhla. Siyabonga kakhulu kakhulu kakhulu. Dr. Rasin, Comrade Jabavu, ngicela uvalelise ababukele ekhaya, ubashiye nje nalinye bese sesiyavala.
Leadership and comrades and everybody else, ngijabule kakhulu kuba part of the discussion yethu namhlanje, and I wish to congratulate the forces of liberation as Eswatini. You all must be proud as a Maswati. You must be proud. Labo Tsibeni was a member of the ANC, contributed money and tinkohomo to support the first conference of the ANC. And during the fight against the apartheid regime, it is the ground forces of Pudemo that helped in the liberation of this country. So it's a historic movement. It should be engraved in the history of Swaziland and the history of South Africa to say that Swati did play a role in the liberation of this country, great economy called South Africa. And that must be known to everybody in South Africa, to everybody in Swaziland, that credit must be given to those young comrades. We used to cross the border, share arms, ammunition, equipment, and crossing over the fence and hiding DLBs in our houses and hiding weapons that we didn't even understand. But the role that you played as Swazis in the struggle for liberation of South Africa makes me very, very proud. Because Naming Swati, I am a dual heritage, you know. My mother is Swati, and I am proud of being Swati. And this dual heritage which I have to me makes me very, very proud to be able to talk proudly about Eswatini, to be able to talk proudly about the role we played in liberating South Africa, and to also be proud to be a South African at the same time. Who knows, tomorrow I may come back and say, I want to stay Eswatini. Maybe I will be part of the process. History always dictates, but I just want Swazis to be proud of their stance and to be proud of this great organization called Pudemo, because it is Pudemo. The history is there. It is Pudemo that stood up in the midst of the crisis and the aggression against the liberation movement. Pudemo stood up and said, we are going to march on. We are going to stand with the liberation movement as a South Africa. We are going to fight for the liberation of South Africa because we are part and parcel of Southern Africa. I thank you and I say, Amandla, the struggle continues. We shall overcome. Thank you, Comrade.
Siyabonga Dr. Rasin. Emakhaya ngumzwanele ngakashongwe. Siyabonga kakhulu ukuthi nesilalele. Siyacela ke futhi mase sibuya si-advertise lenye lesinye isikolo sicela ukuthi nibe nathi sitaqhubeka ngokubamba letikolo tethu up until the end of the year. Emakhaya nisale kahle, nilale kahle amaswati. Likhumbule ukuthi insika inkululeko yamaswati yanitsanza futhi timisela ukuthi ilwe nani up until liberation. Amandla, nilale kahle.